Reboot there, Joel.
Oh, okay.
We're ready to go now.
All right, so we're gonna start out the class today by just recapping couplets 12 and 13 in the 2022 Canadian Dialectus Key to Females. And we kind of glossed over those in the first, last week. So we're gonna just show a couple more specimens to show those characters. And then we're gonna get really into the pilosum group, which most of those run to couplet 73. They all have those uniformly dense punctures, except pruinosum, which is the one we were looking at last week, is the exception. That one has sparser punctures.
Should I pull up the PDF now while you're talking?
Sure.
Okay.
And maybe while we're doing that, there's already a question in the chat. David, our good friend David, I have a specimen ID'd as Dialectus close to pruinosum, not apparently metallic in any way. How do I otherwise confirm at least that this specimen is in fact Dialectus?
So it's not metallic, like not even the head or the mesosoma.
Correct.
I mean, it's not impossible that you would have an entirely black Dialectus. Those do occur very, very rarely. But if it's not metallic, usually that means it's not a Dialectus.
I was afraid of that, so we have to start from scratch. Thanks.
Yeah, that would probably be a hemihelictus, but I can't think of any that are like hairy like pruinosum is. Is it really hairy, or does it have less tomentum than pruinosum?
Probably less. And I do have 3 replicates of the same thing. None of them are metallic really in any way, although maybe my eye doesn't get it.
Well, yeah, it's the difference between being brown and green. So,
Right. It's some sort of in the eye of the beholder in my experience. I don't see it as quickly as some do. Thanks.
Where are they from?
Oregon.
So they could be. I think they could be buckly.
Okay.
there are some long. I mean, some of the like foxy eye group things have longish faces with relatively dense punctures. So.
Right. I can reject Collie because that one, I mean, the examples I've seen are quite long faces. This one doesn't fit that.
Okay, so yeah, maybe something in the foxy eye group.
Because the pilosum and leucocomus, that group has really long, I mean, they are almost the longest ones you're in general going to see. You have the odds and ends things that are a little bit longer, but they're about as long as it gets, with like longer fronds being an exception.
Or maybe like does Ovaliceps get a black metasoma sometimes?
I've never seen one that I can recall. Yeah, I mean, I think anything else would be pretty distinctive.
Yep. Well, anyways.
Send it to us.
Yeah. Actually, I have really super good photos of it, so certainly I could send it to you. The other thing is I don't want to drag everybody down my own particular rat holes. But let's see, what was my question? I'll come back to it.
All right. So yeah. So we kind of glossed over couplet 12 last week. This prepodium with or without this oblique carina. And then to go to couplet 3, or the carina is not curved and partially separating the dorsal slope. So that kind of is a little bit hard to envision, but it's basically saying that it doesn't have the carina, or if it does, it'll be really thin and weak and not really distinct. And I'm going to show a specimen and hopefully can make it a little bit more clear. Let's see, can I just share directly.
Yeah, you can grab it. You should just hit share and you'll be in charge.
All right. So this is a Lasioglossum incompletum. It's a very common Dialictus in the West. Actually, probably the most common one in the northwestern United States and Western Canada. So the carina we're looking for is right here on the perpodium. You can see there's this kind of raised, darker line that's kind of U-shaped at the corners of the perpodium. You can see it on the other side right here, kind of through the wing. You can see it there.
Hey, Joel, could you, on your microscope, a lot of times you can flip the underside to a dark color or stick a black piece of or a dark piece of paper under. I think the white reflecting off of the base makes it more difficult to see those things than a dark color in my experience, but because it can barely see that.
I'll see what I can do.
Usually the disc flips over, well, on the ones that I'm used to.
Well, on the cheap microscopes, it does.
Or just a darker piece of paper.
Here we go.
Yeah.
All right. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see the carina, the loop there, carina, a lot better. Although it's just peeking out.
Yep. So this is the perpodial triangle is kind of right here, kind of makes like a crescent shape on the dorsal surface, and the dorsolateral slope is kind of this area between the perpodial triangle and the side of the perpodium down here. So you can see how like the carina sort of curves up, it kind of loops up, and it sort of separates those two surfaces. That's what you're looking for with that character.
So show the curve just so that people can see it, because you're really only seeing part of it because the wing is in the way, right? Just use your cursor to outline.
You're basically seeing all of it. It doesn't go that far. So on the other side, you can see it here. There's like this bold black line you can see through the wing, and it kind of stops right here. So,
okay, can we add a little more light? I'm having a hard time actually seeing in there. There we go. Okay, yeah, I was actually looking at a reflectance of the rear face and getting confused. So could you repeat again, please, for me, where the oblique carina are?
so there's the left one is right here. Kind of makes this U shape, and then the right one, you can see it through the wing membrane right here.
Yep.
This is an interesting example because it's not common that you would get the lateral extensions that are kind of going forward for that U shape. So some bees will have just a little carina that's sort of angled towards the midline. And then there's a few species like incompletum in the west and something like Illinois in the east. Yeah, tend to have that kind of more U-shaped.
Little horseshoes.
Yeah. So you won't, if you see oblique carina, you won't always have that shape. It might just be the centers.
Yep. So if you see a bee that has this carina, but it kind of stops right here where I'm pointing, it stops in the midpoint right here, so it only goes, it's like a straight line. That would go on to couplet 13. So that would be a more weak carina. So you're looking for this upward extension, this U or V shape on that couplet.
And you have illustrations of this too, so.
Yep, there are also figures in the P.
Shall I go back to the PDF?
Yeah, so I'm just going to quick throw up a predominately on here too, and maybe see if we can see the alternative state. So here is the perpodium on a pruinosum. And yeah, it's wiggling too much. I gotta stick this B in place. Yeah, so here you can see there's not really any carina on the perpodium. There's maybe like some weak rugosity here, but it's not really distinct, and it definitely doesn't curve up and separate the dorsolateral slope from the side face. So this is what the alternative state looks like.
Can we flip to the PDF?
Yep.
All right. So the first one here, just to reiterate, perpodium without oblique carina would be the pruinosum. And
Right.
with the oblique carina would be the incompletum as examples.
Right.
Many more in this category, would you say, than this category?
Many more. Yeah. That's the default state.
Yep, there are many more that don't have that strong oblique carina. So there's only 2 species that run to couplet 83, incompletum and illinoense.
Yeah, it's such a distinctive character that if you're in like California or something and you see that, you barely don't have to look at anything else. You can just look at that podium and be like, yeah, that's incomplete.
All right, onward. Joel, are we going to 13 or 83?
Yes. We'll stop at 13 briefly, and we saw the pruinosum last week with the scutum with the sparser punctures. I'm just going to show a pilosum right now so that you can see the alternative state and see those uniformly dense punctures that I was talking about.
So you'll have to reshare.
Yep, I'm getting the specimen ready right now.
Okay. It's always a pain to do these specimens online just because there's a lag in the focus.
All right, so here's a pilosum. This is one of the ones that has the really uniformly dense punctures on the scutum. So you can see like all the way throughout, all the punctures are pretty much almost the same distance apart. Like even up here in the anterior portion, they're just as dense as they are down here in the middle. So that's really what you're looking for on this character. Get that. Get the anterior portion more in focus. It looks like kind of sparse when it's out of focus. Yeah, get it more in focus, and then you can see definitely dense punctures up there.
And there are some bees that get pretty dense, but if you start seeing the interspaces between the punctures are in any area like more than a puncture diameter, like fairly consistently, then you're not going to run that way in the key. There may be a few things that run both ways when we think that people could get confused in the West. But
Always good.
Yep. All right. So then we can move on to couplet 70, 73. Okay, so then, yeah, here is where we get to perpunctatum, separating that one out.
I actually have a perpunctatum head ready to go whenever
Mm.
All right.
anybody wants.
All right, I think am I showing the PDF here? We're at couplet 73.
Yep.
Okay.
Then I just share. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have shared. Sorry, I overtook you.
It's okay. Yeah. Go ahead and
So I think the next couple was about head length. So this is one of the species that most likely gets mixed in with Lasioglossum pilosum in the east. So this is the face of Lasioglossum perpunctatum, and it is basically the head length and the head width are about the same. So it's not a long-faced bee, but it looks pretty. It has dense punctures. It has some metallic reflections. It's relatively hairy, so it would be easy to mistake it for pilosum. But this is a short face.
also, doesn't it have fewer? Go ahead, Joel.
I think it is different in other ways, in that there's some subtle punctures on the mesopisternum. The
T2.
the rugosity of the propodial triangle or the metaposternum is kind of different. So it is different in a number of ways, and it's kind of unrelated. It just happens to also have quite dense punctures.
I think of this as a more northern Appalachian bee, so we really don't get any down here on the coastal plain. What's your impression, and also what's your impression of commonness?
It can be really abundant. That's probably right. Like I've seen it a lot in Canada, and I think the type localities in Colorado. So it's pretty abundant in. I think of it as an open kind of grassland bee. It's not one I see in a lot of wooded areas. But there are times when it's very abundant, but it's not. I think Lasioglossum pilosum and Leucocomus are more often abundant in people's collections, but I have seen in individual collections where perpunctatum is one of the most common species.
Yeah,
but it was from Canada.
Yep. Okay.
Maybe just while we have a face up, just show, remind the group where you're measuring from.
Yeah, can you show your measuring points again, Jason?
Absolutely. So there's two discrepant ways of measuring the head length. So in my older papers, I used head length, which was basically from the top of the vertex here down to the end of the clypeus down there. It's actually kind of a lip at the end of the clypeus. It's sometimes harder to see here. If you see in Joel's papers, he uses face length. And so he's measuring from the bottom of the mid-ocellus to the same spot on the clypeus. And that's because that sort of vertex area sometimes, as it kind of goes behind gradually, kind of curves gradually, and so it's harder to get it in a sharp focus with the clypeus at the same time. So that's why there's sort of shift to the facial length. And then the width is just across the compound eyes at the widest part. It's usually right around. And it's the ratio of those two things is usually what.
Yep.
And it's sometimes your perspective is not always fair. So sometimes you might think that one is longer than the other just by looking at it, but if you actually measure it, it's not. So hopefully those ratios are correct. But
in other words, the face needs to be at right angles to the plane of sight down the microscope.
Yeah, if you have a long face, if it's a long face bee, if you tilt it this way, you can see my hand. It starts to look less long as you tilt it. So you have to have it at a good angle so that clypeus is straight across it. So something like I have here is about right.
Yeah.
Yep. That for this couplet at least. For separating perpunctatum from the pilosum group species, you can totally eyeball it. The difference is significant enough Let's see. Oh, and then yeah, should we talk about the other characters, the mesopisternum punctures on perpunctatum?
I don't know if I can show them.
I mean, this is a good general and tricky point of many identifications of Dialictus, because many times if you look hard enough at the mesopisternum or the pleura there on the side, you're like, oh, are those pits? Is that pitting that I'm seeing, or is that not pitting? So maybe a little philosophical notion of what you think of punctate or pitting and what you think of not punctate or pitting.
If you have to think too hard about it, it's probably not punctate.
Okay.
The line
So it should be
that
obvious.
Yeah, the line that I draw is if you look at the punctures and whether or not they're round. So there's often punctures that are like almost there if the mesopisternum is kind of rubulose, but they'll be kind of like jammed together so that the edges are they're kind of square or they're irregular shaped and they're not perfectly round. And in that case, that would be rubulose or rugose sculpture. Or else sometimes they'll be like really, really, really faint. And in that case, they won't be like really distinct. They'll kind of blend into the surrounding sculpture. So they have to be round and they have to be more pronounced than other sculpture on the surface. So like if there's any ridges or anything, the punctures should be like as deep and distinct as the ridges are high or deeper.
So we get back to, it should be obvious when you look at it and go like, oh, there's pitting there, versus looking at it for a while and going like, am I imagining pitting? That would be not what you want.
Right.
All right, should we go to 74?
Yes, but I'm if I can, I'm just going to show you something, hopefully. So this is perpunctatum. I don't know if I can make that any brighter. But, and it's not, the resolution is not that great, but where there are little punctures that you can kind of see just on this kind of shiny bit. I'd have to like rotate the specimen to get like you often need to like have the specimen in your hand and rotate across the kind of curvature of the mesopisternum to see everything.
Can you add more light? Can you add more light, Jason? Or no? Are you a manual? Is there a? So again, in the system you have where it says exposure, you have that little pull down menu that says 2 right now. If you change it on the right hand side, yep. You should go, nope, the other way. And now try one of those. And it should, well, maybe not. Anyway, that should have changed the light. We won't dive. You're using the same thing we have, and it should have changed the exposure. You should be able to change the exposure on that system. There we go. Oh, I was the opposite direction. My apologies.
Brighter, but I don't know if you can. It's maybe less focus. Yeah, I'm going to stop touching it. I think the exposure also makes the lag longer. Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, you're looking for, as you know, this fairly round, deep punctures. I'll stop sharing because that's a little bit dark.
Yep, I have a prunosum that I can show the alternative state. I can show one that does not have punctures.
Are you gonna do that now, Joel?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay.
So here's a prunosum, and this is what I would call weakly rugulose. Is what I call this sculpture. So you can see it's there's like kind of some punctures down here, like kind of some round pits, but they're really like jammed together. They're not perfectly round, and there's all this irregular ridges kind of all over the place. So you can and like especially like up here on the this is the hypoepimeron up here, this area right below the wing. And there's also kind of some punctures on that surface. Let's see if I can get them in focus. Yeah, there's maybe some pits there, but again, they're like really jammed together, and not all of them are perfectly round. So
not obvious.
Yep, they're not obvious. Yep, so this is rugulose. And all of the pilosum group species will have sculpture like this on the mesopisternum.
All right, I'll take you back to the PDF.
All right.
So I think we're trying to go down to 74 here. Oh, there's a nice comparison of the two. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's actually Macrophosophum and Bruniaventer, which are two species that key out down this way. There's one of these that has a slightly longer face, and this one is not as easy to eyeball. You have to do some measurements to separate those ones.
But so yeah, these are long face ones that occur in the west. But if you kind of look at for me, the shape of the face is slightly different. So if you kind of compare the face shape in 42 versus the figure 43, which kind of you'll scroll past, they're not the same. And this is actually, I think this is a pretty decent version of the Leucocoma succipede pilosum clypeus. About as good as you can get in a static image for that, which we talked about last class. Anyway.
Okay, so we go back to the here.
Yep. So this one is pretty straightforward. Just are the metasomal terga metallic blue-green, or are they not? So that I don't think most people have trouble with that unless you have like dirty, goopy specimens. So
Which do you want to go to?
So the pilosum group species are all metallic, so they would all go to 79. All right, so okay, then we get to the mesopisternum punctata rugulose again. So we kind of already covered that when we were separating perpunctatum. So yeah, the pilosum group specimens all have rugulose sculpture, so they'll go to 81. All right, here we get to, this is the pilosum group right now. So 81 is where it starts. So here's where we separate out pilosum. That's probably the easiest one to recognize because it has this really distinctive clypeus. And yeah, there is a good figure in the key. But we also, and we showed a specimen last week too, which kind of showed that clypeus. Do we need to revisit this? Should we show another one?
Here it is. Are you seeing your specimen in the paper? Here, C.
Yep.
As pilosum. So those are the squared off end of the clypeus versus angled. I do have a little question. Mike Ireduzer and I are working on the bees of Maryland. I'm comparing notes between areas, and he finds that pilosum is, in Missouri, a sand specialist. Like, he would say that's a sand specialist, and we have a pretty tight definition of that. In Maryland, I see them in a broader range of habitats than simply sand. What do you guys feel about that? They're really common.
I've certainly seen them from a lot of different locations, not all of which have sand that I know about. They do tend to show up a lot in sandy areas. Like, if you go to a sandy area, you're very likely to find these. But I've seen them other places too. So
Okay.
it seems like they like sand, but they're not obligates.
All right. That's interesting. Yeah, it's my experience.
I would like to know, if I can, want to show, there's a supplementary character that I like for pilosum versus the other two, which is not here in the key, but if you ever have a specimen with the head knocked off, it's good. Check.
Are you going to show it to us?
I'm going to try to show it to you, although the lighting is not perfect yet, or the focus is not perfect.
Oh, yeah, this is good to cover.
So, and I think it's a little flipped, but if you look at the first tergum, there's a little patch right here, kind of submedially, that is less punctate than the other parts of the tergum. So yeah, so this is the midline, and just a little bit right here. It's kind of a, just before this apical and crest area that's kind of reddish. Right there, there's less punctures. In pilosum, it's almost completely void of microsculpture. You might see a little, if you look really closely, you might see a few little hints of lines, but it's pretty smooth and shiny. Whereas in Leucocomus and Septipene, it's like unambiguously microsculpture.
What about the pitting in those other two? Same.
I don't have any thoughts. No distinctive differences that I can think of where I've noticed.
So it's all about the microstructure.
Yeah. So if you look right there, and you see, I think it's one of those things where I wouldn't. If you're in pilosum area and you see the distinctive head and you see some microsculpture there, don't worry about it. But it's almost always smooth.
Okay.
So it's a secondary kind of case.
We have a secret character that only the people who are on this talk will ever know. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's not just there. Like, pilosum has a shinier metazoma in general to me. That might be the easiest place to see it.
Cool. All right, are we moving to non-parallel margins now?
Sure.
Yeah. So how does everyone feel about pilosum? Do you feel like you could identify that bee if you found it in your collection?
Let me ask a additional question that sometimes is listed within its descriptions, which is the gold hairs versus white hairs. What do you think?
I think there's it's regionally different, maybe. Like, I think the pilosum we get here in Manitoba are less distinctly yellow than see maybe in the sort of mid kind of East Coast range, I guess. So the pilosum classic. And then a few people have sent me, I think, when some of the people who were doing work on some of the islands off the East Coast, some of their specimens were quite white.
Yeah.
And
this is my impression, is that here in the mid-Atlantic, so south of the island people, that a lot of the pilosums, conform. A lot of golden hair kind of things, but quite a number are also almost completely white. And you're like, oh, am I looking at leucocomas here? And then you're looking at the bill, I would call it, and I'm like, no, those are definitely parallel sided, but it's white. So okay, just clarifying, because it's it's even given the name by whoever comes up with the common names of things in iNaturalist is like golden haired, blah blah blah. So
oh yeah, like leucocomus, that name literally means white head. That's what it means in Latin. But it is variable.
Have you seen leucocomus with golden hair though, or yellowish hair? Do you see the opposite at all?
Usually, yeah, I've seen a lot of leucocomus with golden hairs.
Okay. Scratch that one, but add the secret character.
I mean, when you get these really some like Pilosum Classic, when you get this like that, you can sometimes just look at the scutum and know that that's going to be a Pilosum.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like really, they just have a different vibe, but yeah.
Okay. So Sacinipenny.
All right. Yep. So this is the tricky one. This is the trickiest pair. Even we are not super confident separating these two species. The best character that I've found is that Succionipenny has a slightly longer face, but it's not so significant that you can just eyeball it. It's something you have to measure. And yeah, it says Rocky Mountains and Midwest in the key, but we're not actually confident that it is in the Midwest or if those are all leucocomas, but it's definitely a Rocky Mountain species. I've found a few other specimens from Colorado, and I think I found some from northern New Mexico that I'm pretty confident are leucocomas. So it's definitely in the Rocky Mountains. And yeah, if you scroll up to that figure where it compares the heads, we don't have any. At least I don't have any Succionipenny. Maybe Jason does, but this is the type actually. That middle image, 43B. That's the face of the type of Succionipenny. And if you compare it to A, you can see that it is slightly longer.
And I always think that the end of the clypeus is starting to head down the Pilosum path. It's not quite there, but yeah. It's not,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, when you look at them side by side, they're not quite the same. And it does, like the type and the specimens that you pulled out do have the kind of microsculptured metasoma as well. So yeah, so the type of leucocomas is Maine, the type of Succionipenny is Colorado, and then Pilosum I think is probably just the United States.
Mm-hmm. What about integument color? I have a vibe from the literature, but I really don't think I've ever actually seen a Sacinipenny that it should be blue. But is that not also valid to think about?
Well, the type is, it's not as golden as like a lot of, like it's not as golden as this picture of Pilosum on the right, but it's not really what I would call blue.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's definitely, I've definitely seen, there's some weird Pilosum, like as you go further west, there's some weird Pilosum. Once you get into the Rocky Mountains, there's some weird Pilosum that co-occur with Succionipenny, and those can be like really blue.
Yeah. In the Badlands, I would see every once in a while a very blue pilosum that I wanted desperately to call Sacinipenny, but now I think probably we're not.
I feel like in that sort of like the Great Plains area, there's a lot of blue Dialictus with very pale wings.
Mm-hmm.
And it, I don't know why exactly what that's an adaptation for, but it could be that some of the pilosum out here are just going down that path.
Right.
Oh,
We had we had tons of albapenny, tons of semi-cerulean there, all which are in that white wing, and then also lots of pruinosum, white wing, bright blue, metallic, very white-haired things.
Yep, and we have a question in the, or a request in the chat.
Thank you.
Is to show how to measure the length of the supraclypeal area. Which is that's a good question. Because that is also used in this couplet to separate it out Sacinipenny.
Do you want to show it on a specimen, or do you want to show it off this picture, or what?
I can show it off the picture is probably easiest. So.
Okay.
Do you feel confident showing that, Sam, or should I share my screen?
I think so. I mean, this one, it's very difficult to see the supraclypeal margin. We could use this leucocomus here as an example. So here's the bottom. This will be interesting. I'm always confused what counts as the top of the supraclypeal area. So bottom clear, here's that line right there. Where is the top?
Well, the bottom is not quite that clear because it's often slightly curved. So the top of the clypeus will be sort of convex. It'll be curving up. So if you measure it from the middle, it'll be different than if you measure it from the edges. So we measure it basically from the tentorial pits.
Over here.
That juncture where the sides of the supraclypeal area meet the clypeus, and it's like this three-way juncture. We measure it from there up to the lower margin of the antenna socket.
Got it. Is that obvious for most people? I can maybe increase the magnification of this document a little bit, hopefully. View, zoom to. So that's an important point. So tentorial pit area, just really, there is a pit, but it's hard to see. It's this junction. Here's a suture line, here's a suture line, here's a suture line. The meeting from there, and then you're doing the closest point to the fossa and the carina around it, I guess, to the antenna. So that to that is the length, and the width is tentorial pit to tentorial pit?
Yep.
Okay.
Regardless of curve?
Regardless of the curve, just
It's straight across.
Straight distance from juncture to juncture.
Well, you can see this a little bit better now here. So this would be roughly, it's a little hard to see, but I would say roughly about there is the tentorial pit. And so we have there to there. So theoretically, this is longer, right? So
See Ellen's question.
Ellen has a question that is supposed to be good.
Is the measurement following the subantennal suture or perpendicular to the horizontal at that tentorial pit?
You do it perpendicular to the horizontal. Or straight line from the tentorial pit up to the bottom of the antenna socket is probably a better way to put it.
We can look at
subantennal suture kind of like tapers off towards the top, and it's kind of hard to follow. And kind of hard to judge where the end point of that is.
Yep. The pit's pretty obvious. Maybe not so much in these pictures, but when you get in a microscope, you know, it's a hollow, it's got shadow associated with it. So those are good. Those are good because often this edge here, this line sort of disappears, particularly if there's hair. All right, so shorter, longer, in between.
Sure.
Did I express that right?
Sorry, what were you asking?
I'm just, go ahead, Jason.
You were trying to put pilosum in that camp. I mean, I don't think we worry too much about pilosum because you can recognize it on other things.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've ever measured it directly in comparison in that way. But I was just going to say that unless you start getting out into the Colorado Great Plains, probably Suxapenny doesn't need to be on your radar. If you're east of the Mississippi, I would just worry about pilosum and Lake Palmas. And Suxapenny is something that probably gradually, eventually, Joel and I will figure out, and then we'll let everybody.
I mean, there are a bunch of Westerners on these talks sometimes, so you'll have to dial back in over the years.
And most of these things don't seem to make it in, like, these are not what I consider like West Coast Great Basin species.
Oh yeah, predominately is very common in the West, but the others are kind of restricted to the East.
Yeah, every once in a while, someone from like Washington or something will send me a bee that is like a very distinctively like Cressonii or Zephyrus, and so some things do creep across, but
yeah, and vice versa. So you recall the semi-cerulean that showed up in Maryland in 3 places.
It took me a long time to convince me that was true. I certainly didn't believe it at first, but
and then and I mean some of those specimens came before I even went out west. Just to alleviate the thought. And I believe everyone now. Yeah. And then pruinosum is this kind of thing that I didn't quite believe was that eastern, and then it just shows up in sort of prairie-like environments, which can be agricultural, but it's, you know, a super open thing, but sometimes it can be lawn-ish even. And Albapenny too shows up. All right, so where are we here? Do we want to take this any further?
Yeah, we basically got to the end of the pilosum group in the Canada key. We could talk about Floridanum now. That one is not in the Canada key because it doesn't occur in Canada.
Yeah.
Which also kind of gets into a question that was in chat a little earlier about the differences between this key and the Eastern US one and how much overlap there is and whether or not you can use one for the other. So yeah, there are quite a few species that occur in the Eastern US that don't occur in Canada. They're too far south. Floridanum is one of them. So if you're like in the northeast of the US, you can probably use the Canada key with no problems. Once you get down to like Maryland, New Jersey, or any further south than that, then you probably want to use the Eastern US key. So that what the Canada key adds on top is there were new species that were discovered in Canada that we had to add into this key. There are some new males that were described too, but most of them are Western. They don't occur in the East. So the Eastern US key is basically, it's still good.
I'm going to show.
So I would say South Dakota. So
okay, good.
Far west, north, kind of plains area colleagues feel confident with the keys.
Well, it's all of Canada, so it would include the mountains. They're just a little sketchy on a couple species, right?
Yeah, there may be some things that get into South Dakota that wouldn't make it all the way to Canada, but for the most part, I think, the Great Plains and the mountains are kind of corridors, and things kind of run all the way up. So things that occur in that were described from Boulder, Colorado, we find them like sometimes all the way up to the Yukon. And then, where I am in Manitoba, we get things that co-occur in like Texas. So there's a lot of things that kind of go all the way up and down. So it should be reasonably good.
Yeah, basically, like the further away you are from the Canadian border, the more caution you should use when using that key. So if you try to key out a bee and you can't figure it out and it doesn't seem to match anything, then yeah, the further away you are, the more likely it is that's just a species that's not included.
So the way a lot of these things work is you use multiple keys. So you can use the Eastern Dialectus key, you can use Discover Life, you can use the Canada one, and a lot of times it's a triangulation thing, using the combination of slightly different ways of speaking about differences and identifying things will help you, because one approach may make more sense to you than another. Remember, each of these is written by a different person, and that person has their way of thinking about specimens and describing them to you, because they already know the specimens, right? So it's notes to myself that hopefully are helpful to you. So always think about using several sources if you're struggling.
And you're allowed to ask for help.
There you go.
Yeah. Don't be shy. I put a floridanum up here. At least that's what the label on the specimen said. And one of the distinguishing features from the classic pilosum is just the microsculpture of the metapostnotum, the sort of proteal triangle. It's the rugosity is barely raised above the background level of kind of microsculpture. It is really kind of granular in appearance. It tends to be less hairy on the metazoma as well. But yeah, this used to be a subspecies of pilosum that was, floridanum from Florida, like it's supposed to be really southern. But we do occasionally find specimens that have this kind of characteristics all the way up into the Midwest.
Yeah, we have them regularly in Maryland. It is definitely a sand specialist from what both Mike and my experiences are. And I think in the Great Lakes, the locations for the species, which are scattered, are also in the big sand deposits in the centers of Michigan, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I don't know about elsewhere. But it is, it's a little bit tricky, because the pilosum and leucocomus and that crowd have pretty messy striations there. But there's patterning. There's a patterning of linearity, let's call it, to their propodiums. And floridanum is almost completely absent of anything. It's just a bunch of bumps. And then I always find that the junction between the dorsal triangle area and the rear face, where it slopes down, looks different. I can't give you why, but it's like there's a vibe, as Jason says, to it's the backside. So it is a little tough. I don't know if there's anything else that separates them out.
I mean, if you look at, so I don't know how well focused this is, but that's your kind of vibe of the propodium to the dorsal surface.
Yeah.
And then, but if you look at, this is the metazoma, it's not that hairy. It's not something you would name pilosum. it tends to be less hairy than pilosum classic.
Which is still pretty hairy, but in comparison to pilosum, which would have T3 almost completely covered in hairs, it's less. Now, what about your secret spot?
I think it's smooth, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's more pilosum. I don't know if I can bend this into a view that you can actually see it. My recollection is that it's smooth, but I can't.
Okay,
It's the lighting is not good enough on this.
not behaving.
But you would be kind of looking right around here, right? This kind of spot right down here is kind of where you're looking at sculpturing.
Tracy,
And this light looks good.
If the propodium of floridatum sort of looks like the propodium of Halictus confusus.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Tracy is asking confusus propodium versus floridanum propodium.
I've never made that connection.
So
Yeah,
it's
think
maybe, I don't know. It's maybe kind of similar in like the pattern of the ridges, but floridanum they'll be a lot weaker. So Halictus confusus, well, it has like kind of like a shiny propodium and has definite raised ridges on it. That are kind of like confused all over the place. But if you look at like floridanum, you can see it's like definitely dull, and the ridges aren't really distinct. They're kind of blended into the underlying microsculpture, so it's much more weakly sculptured. So
It's probably more like Halictus tripartatum, which has a really different propodium. Well, not really different. We're in that same vaguely different, but more uniformly bumpy than patterned compared to confusus.
yeah, even Halictus tripartitus has definite parallel ridges on it. So it's still not exactly like floridanum. But that is a good point. If you do have a Halictus confusus and you don't notice that it's Halictus and you try to key it out as a dialictus, you'll probably run it to the pilosum group. So you'd probably run floridanum or leucocomus or something.
The males in particular, people have historically gotten mistaken because you can't see the wing venation character for Lasioglossum very well. And except for the more yellow legs and the larger size of a Halictus confusus, they do share a lot of the features of a pilosum. So they kind of go both ways. So check your pilosum males and Halictus confusus males.
Yep. If in doubt, there's actually the fun limerick you can use to remember the difference between Halictus and dialictus. So you can remember, I once had a strange dialictus. I thought Gibbs was wrong or he tricked us, but the turgor pubescens was apically dense. It was just a confusing Halictus.
There you go. You heard it here.
Yep. Look at the turgor pubescens on the apex of the tergites.
We are definitely in a nerd class here.
I think we're kind of short on time, but if anyone has any last questions.
All right.
We're gonna wrap us up, but
This is
we can talk offline if you would love to come back. The service is invaluable. If so, are there let me know in the chat or email if there's another group that you'd like to prioritize within the key, or if you want us to just kind of go back to the beginning and work through.
If I could vote, I would say that whole admiratum, versatum, pallidum, trigeminum, quadfecta is something that really blows people's minds.
So you just want to jump right into the hellish species right away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
trying to put up a Floridanum face for the person in the chat who asked. And the answer is yeah, they do kind of look like a pilosum face. So I can get the.
Looks like it's got some angle there.
I might not have the angle quite right. It's not perfectly. I'm looking through one ocular and trying to get it to match the other oculars.
Mm.
Thank you, everyone. We deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great.
I'm going to stop the recording, but if anybody needs to keep chatting, that's available to you for a couple more minutes.